$174 billion. It is the price tag for keeping a modern state from running dry. Not a moonshot project. Not a military budget. A repair bill. Delivered in a quiet government report in April of 2026. As of this month, the Texas Water Development Board projects that is what it will cost over 50 years to prevent the second largest state in America from facing a catastrophic water failure. 5 years ago, that number was $80 billion. Something has changed. The timeline for disaster has collapsed. Texas is losing its water, not to a single spill, not to one specific drought. The state is being drained from below through a million tiny fractures in pipes 60 years old. It's being pumped from ancient aquifers that will not refill for 1,000 years. And it is being lost to a water debt owed by another country that is functionally bankrupting farms along the Rio Grande. This is the story of a crisis that is no longer coming. It is already here. Hidden under cracked pavement and behind corporate negotiations. And the strangest part isn't that Texas is running out of water. It's that the state is losing more water through simple leaks every day than 5 of its major cities use combined. To understand what is happening in Texas, you have to understand a number that seems impossible. 572,000 acre-feet. That is the volume of treated. Clean water that vanishes into the soil every year before it ever reaches a tap. It seeps out of corroded iron pipes. It bleeds from cracked mains. It disappears through joints that have not been replaced since the 1950s. The water is gone. Wasted. An acre-foot is the amount of water it takes to cover 1 acre of land, 1 foot deep. About 326,000 gallons. So Texas isn't just leaking. It's hemorrhaging nearly 187 billion gallons a year. Imagine the entire municipal water supply for the cities of Austin, El Paso, Fort Worth, Laredo, and Lubbock. All of it. Enough for millions of people. Now imagine it poured directly into the ground. That is the reality of the Texas water system today. Perry Fowler, the executive director of the Texas Water Infrastructure Network, has been trying to make state legislators see this for years. His organization, TXWIN, represents the people who actually build and maintain these systems. They are the ones who see the rust. They are the ones who calculate the pressure loss. Every day, for every single home and business connection in the state, 51 gallons of water just disappear. This is the part the official press releases do not capture. The problem is not a lack of water falling from the sky. It's a complete failure of the infrastructure built to capture and transport it. Most of Texas's water system, its reservoirs and pipelines, were engineered in the middle of the 20th century. They were built for a different climate and for a different population. They were built for a Texas that no longer exists. Today's Texas is a magnet. It has one of the fastest growing populations in the nation, projected to surge from 34 million to over 52 million people by the year 2080. It has become the hub for industries that are pathologically thirsty, data centers for AI, semiconductor fabrication plants, massive petrochemical complexes, and all of it is being built on top of a plumbing system that is bleeding out. In November of 2023, Texas voters approved Proposition 6. It was a landmark vote, creating the Texas Water Fund, a $1 billion down payment on fixing the problem. The effort was championed by State Senator Charles Perry, a Republican from Lubbock who chairs the Senate's Committee on Water and Agriculture. It was hailed as a historic first step. But here is the detail that tells the real story. $1 billion sounds like a lot of money. Against a $174 billion problem, it is barely a rounding error. It is, in the words of experts on the ground, a drop in the bucket. A bucket that is riddled with holes. Perry Fowler put it bluntly after seeing the new cost projection. What this number tells me, he said, is if we don't get serious about, there are going to be serious consequences for Texas. The consequences are already arriving. They are just happening underground, where a much older, much slower crisis is reaching its endgame. Zoom out from the cities and their leaking pipes. Look west to the high plains of the Texas Panhandle. There is no Rio Grande here. Few major lakes. Just a flat expanse of earth that happens to be some of the most productive farmland on the planet. For a century, this region has been an agricultural powerhouse. Cotton, corn, cattle, it feeds America. And it all runs on water that is, for all practical purposes, finite. This is the domain of the Ogallala Aquifer. It is not a lake. It is not an underground river. The Ogallala is a colossal subterranean sponge. A sprawling formation of gravel, sand, and silt saturated with ancient water, stretching under 8 states from South Dakota to Texas. The water in its southern reaches, beneath the Texas plains, is largely fossil water. It seeped into the ground during the last ice age. It has almost no meaningful recharge rate. Every gallon pumped out is a gallon that is gone for good, on a human timescale. For generations, farmers have been drilling into it, pulling up the clear, cold water to turn a semi-arid landscape into a green oasis. It fueled a post-war economic boom. It built towns. It created legacies. And now, the account is going into overdraft. The Texas Water Development Board projects that groundwater levels across the state are on track to decline by 32% by the year 2070. At least 7 of the state's 20 major aquifer systems are being pumped unsustainably. The Ogallala is the most famous, but it is not alone. The Edwards Trinity Aquifer, further south, is suffering the same fate. Depletion. What does depletion look like? It looks like a farmer drilling a well deeper and deeper each decade, chasing a water table that keeps dropping. It looks like the nozzle pressure on a center pivot irrigator falling year after year. It means a farmer has to make a choice. Plant less cotton, switch to less thirsty crops like sorghum, or go back to dryland farming and pray for rain that the climate models say is becoming less reliable. For many, it means selling the land their family has worked for 100 years. This isn't a prediction. It is an observation. The great agricultural miracle of the Texas High Plains was built on a bank account of water that was never being replenished. The bill is now coming due. The engine of an entire regional economy is sputtering, running out of the fossil fuel it burned for a century. Except the fuel was water. The crisis isn't just about a number in a state report. It's about the slow, silent end of a way of life. A crisis measured in inches per year as the water level drops in thousands of wells across a silent prairie. While the farmers of West Texas watch their lifeblood sink deeper into the earth, another, more volatile water crisis is playing out 400 miles to the south. This one is not about ancient geology. It is about modern politics. It is about a river, a treaty, and a debt. The river is the Rio Grande. On the border between the United States and Mexico, 2 massive reservoirs act as the beating heart of the region. Amistad International Reservoir, near Del Rio, and Falcon International Reservoir, further downstream. They are supposed to store water for farms and cities on both sides of the border. They are managed under a water-sharing treaty signed between the U.S. and Mexico back in 1944. That agreement, negotiated when the world was a different place, dictates exactly how the 2 nations will divide the water of the Rio Grande and the Colorado River. Under the terms, Mexico is obligated to deliver an average of 350,000 acre-feet of water per year from its tributaries into the Rio Grande, measured in 5-year cycles. For decades, the system worked. More or less. Then came the cycle that ended on October 24th, 2025. By that deadline, Mexico had delivered only 50.5% of its required water. It had run up a staggering water deficit of nearly 875,000 acre-feet, an entire lake's worth of water that was legally promised to Texas farmers and cities never arrived. It was kept upstream, a geopolitical decision with devastating real-world consequences downstream. Now, here is the part nobody is putting on the national news. That water debt did not just cause hardship. It killed an entire industry. For years, the Rio Grande Valley Sugar Growers Mill, the last of its kind in Texas, had been the backbone of the local sugarcane industry. But sugarcane is a thirsty crop. Without the full allotment of treaty water, there is simply not enough to keep the fields irrigated. In early 2026, after years of struggling with the water shortages, the mill announced its permanent closure. An industry that had defined the region for generations was wiped out. Gone. The cause of death was not a market crash or a blight. It was an unpaid international debt, measured in acre-feet. The diplomatic fallout was immediate. In May of 2026, U.S. Senator John Cornyn of Texas introduced the Water for Farmers Act. The proposed law is designed to put teeth into the 1944 treaty, giving the U.S. government the power to impose tariffs and other penalties on Mexico for future water delivery failures. It's a hardball tactic born of desperation. As of this week, in early July 2026, the real-time data from the border tells the story better than any politician can. Amistad Reservoir is only 28.3% full. Falcon Reservoir is even lower, at just 24.7%. These are not just numbers. They are the gauges on a system approaching empty. They are a visual record of a treaty broken and a promise unkept. For the farmers in the Rio Grande Valley who look out at withering citrus groves, the fight is not abstract. It is existential. While a new deal was struck in early 2026 for Mexico to begin repaying its water debt, the reservoirs show how deep the hole is. You cannot refill a lake overnight, especially when the rains refuse to come. And even as the border region fights over water that isn't there, a different battle is heating up on the Texas coast. Here, the conflict isn't between two countries. It's between neighbors. It is a fight between residents being told to cut back and massive new industries demanding more. This is the story of Corpus Christi, the city that has become the canary in the coal mine for the entire state. Corpus Christi is a paradox. It is a coastal city, surrounded by the waters of the Gulf of Mexico, yet it is facing one of the most acute freshwater shortages in the state. Its primary water sources are two inland reservoirs, Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon Reservoir. Throughout late 2025 and early 2026, the water levels in those lakes plummeted. They dropped past 30%. Past 20. Then they edged terrifyingly close to 10% capacity. The city was days, maybe weeks, away from declaring a level 1 water emergency. That's not a polite suggestion to water your lawn less. It's a set of mandatory, severe cuts to water use for every home and business. Then, in June 2026, rain came. A series of heavy storms moved through the region. A temporary reprieve delivered by a stalled weather front. Lake Corpus Christi's level jumped back up to 30%. On June 23rd, the city officially announced it could push the projected start of that level 1 emergency back to September of 2027. A year of breathing room. But no one believes the problem is solved. The crisis was merely paused by the weather, not fixed by policy. The mayor of Corpus Christi, Paulette Guajardo, lives with this tension every day. Water security affects everything, she has said. Growth, public safety, jobs, industry, housing, all of it. And it all weighs on me. The weight comes from a fundamental conflict. While her residents are being prepped for extreme conservation, the city is in the middle of an unprecedented industrial boom. New petroleum refineries, manufacturing plants, and even data centers are flocking to the area, drawn by favorable economics. All of them require enormous quantities of water to operate. And this is where the story takes a turn. Because while residents face public scrutiny for their water use, the contingency plans for the city's largest industrial consumers are shielded from public view. They are considered proprietary information. This secrecy has fueled a growing firestorm of local tension. People look at their brown lawns and low-flow shower heads, and then they look at the massive industrial complexes running 24/7, and they ask a simple question: who is really using the water? And whose use is more important? Is it the family of four or the multi-billion-dollar corporation? The city is now facing a critical vote in September 2026 on a proposal to build a billion-dollar seawater desalination plant. It would be a new, drought-proof source of water. But it is expensive, and it raises another, even more pointed question: should taxpayers fund a massive infrastructure project that will largely benefit the very industries stressing the system in the first place? Corpus Christi is a microcosm of the entire Texas dilemma. A booming economy is colliding with a shrinking water supply. A population explosion is straining a system built for a smaller, quieter time. And everyday citizens are being asked to sacrifice while the biggest consumers operate behind a wall of corporate secrecy. The rain in June bought them time. But time does not create water, and the fundamental imbalance remains. The problem, as writer Mezabah Nur Massoum noted in the Texas Observer, isn't a failure of science. The models have been warning about this for decades. It is, in his words, a failure of alignment. The climate is changing faster than the infrastructure built to manage it. And the state's political and economic ambitions have grown far beyond what its natural resources can sustainably support. Texas is fighting a war on three fronts: a war against its own decaying infrastructure, a war against the slow, irreversible depletion of its ancient groundwater, and a geopolitical war over a single, over-allocated river on its southern border. Each of these fights would be difficult on its own. Together, they form a perfect storm. The state's leadership knows they have a problem. The passage of Proposition 6 in 2023 was a clear admission. Senator Charles Perry, who drove the legislation, saw the need for a dedicated fund. But the scale of the problem keeps outpacing the scale of the solution. The jump from an $80 billion projection to a $174 billion projection in just 4 years shocked even the experts. It was a clear signal that every factor, population growth, drought severity, and simple construction costs, is accelerating faster than the state can react. There has been some good news. The state's long, tangled legal battle with New Mexico over water rights on the upper Rio Grande finally came to an end in May of 2026. After a 13-year fight that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, a settlement was reached. The deal creates a new framework to manage groundwater pumping in southern New Mexico, which should, in theory, leave more water in the river to flow downstream into Texas. It was a victory. But it was a victory in one courtroom, on one stretch of one river. It does not fix the leaking pipes in Houston. It does not raise the water level in the Ogallala Aquifer. And it does not erase Mexico's water debt. So what happens now? The $1 billion from the Texas Water Fund will start to flow. It will repair some pipes. It will help fund some new projects. Perhaps even the desalination plant in Corpus Christi. But it is triage. It is putting a bandage on a patient that needs open heart surgery. If another drought of record, a repeat of the worst dry spell in the state's history, were to happen today, Texas would face a water shortage of 5.8 million acre-feet per year by 2080. That is a deficit that cannot be filled by conservation alone. It is a gap that threatens to halt the state's economic growth in its tracks. It is a future where faucets in a Dallas suburb could run dry because of a treaty violation on the Rio Grande, or because an aquifer 1,000 feet below the panhandle has finally been exhausted. Everything is connected. The leaky pipe, the thirsty farm, the international treaty. This is the true meaning of the $174 billion number. It is the cost of latency. The cost of assuming the water would always be there. The cost of building a 21st century economy on 20th century infrastructure and an ice age water supply. The crisis is not theoretical. It has already begun. You can see it in the shuttered sugar mill. You can see it in the exposed lake beds at Choke Canyon. And you can feel it in the tension building in cities like Corpus Christi, where the fight over the last drops of water is just getting started. 3 questions now hang over the state of Texas. How do you pay for a $174 billion problem with a $1 billion solution? How do you balance the explosive growth of industry and population against the finite reality of a dwindling water supply? And what happens when the water that fueled a century of prosperity finally runs out? Somewhere beneath the plains of West Texas, a pump is pulling water from the Ogallala. The water is thousands of years old. In a few hours, it will be sprayed onto a field of cotton. It will create a product that gets shipped around the world. But the water itself will be gone. Used once. Transformed from a stored geological treasure into an atmospheric vapor. And the well that pulled it up will have to drill just a little bit deeper next year. The process is quiet. It is invisible. And for now, it is still happening.